Mini episode 1805 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1805. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris coming at you with one of our favorite FDH Lounge dignitaries, the great sports writer from OurSportsCentral, Fran Stuchbury, and we oftentimes have him on the show to talk football, and that's what we're doing today, and oftentimes within that it's college football, and today we're having him on to talk about the coaching carousel in the offseason of 2024-2025. We're seeing a lot in the NCAA in the last couple of weeks. Some things really pretty shocking. And one move that we're going to be talking about early on is the biggest celebrity move since Deion Sanders went to Colorado, and something that was actually a lot more surprising. I remember being surprised at the time because I thought that Deion possibly could have held out for a job at a more established program. And yeah, I know back in the McCartney days, Colorado was all that in a bag of chips, but that's a long time ago. But so it was a little surprising to me there. Much more surprising what ended up happening in Chapel Hill. We'll get to all of that subsequently. Let me bring in the great Fran Stuchbury. How you doing today, Fran?
Doing good. Excited about breaking down the coaching changes. Not as big as the one we discussed last year.
Yeah, I mean, but there are some very interesting ones too. And I had to kind of reacquaint myself before we got on the air to do this here. Obviously, the big one is Belichick going to UNC, and again, that is one where, I mean, until it happened, I think a lot of us were all really kind of dubious, and maybe he's using this as leverage to try to force one of these NFL teams to get off the pot and hire him. But no, he actually ends up taking the job. He's got it all planned out. He wants to run it as much like a program as possible. It's funny that he brings Michael Lombardi in off the sidelines to be general manager of the program, because it's like, he's had the opportunity over all these years, not this past year, obviously, but before that, to bring Mike Lombardi back into the fold. And by the way, he never did, but now he does down there for something where I think Lombardi is largely going to be involved with off-the-field stuff, probably getting the money lined up and everything like that. But this entire thing of Bill Belichick going to Chapel Hill is just incredibly mind-boggling. That he would be at the same school Dean Smith once was, but again, on the gridiron and trying to establish the gridiron at North Carolina in the same way that Dean Smith did the hard court.
Well, Rick, they're going to go for NIL from about $4 million to $18 to $20 million. As we see in college football, Rick, just because you spend doesn't mean you win.
Yeah.
Remember that.
True, but I'll tell you this. This is one of these things where, again, I don't think it's any accident whatsoever as he was looking at the ACC this year and the Big 12. One of those conferences, you go and you really establish a program there. You look at the whole thing. Again, you're looking at a lot of teams, and we saw it play out in the playoff. A lot of teams that are good to pretty good to whatever level of good, but nobody that's great the way that an SEC champion is, a Big Ten champion, whatever. So to really see that play out that way, if you can establish North Carolina as being anything better than good to pretty good, they're going to be a team that should be in the conference championship game every year during that stretch, and that puts you in position to make the playoffs, potentially, even if you lose.
One thing is the ACC is going to be kind of wide open, because you're going to have SMU, the conference champion. You're going to have Clemson. You're going to have now North Carolina as a possibility. Florida State should get their act together with the jury's out on them.
Yeah, and again, as we saw, this is a Clemson team that managed to win the conference, but again, they're not on a level with where they were a couple of years ago, largely because, again, you haven't really seen the program get behind the transfer portal that much. Dabo has been a little bit stubborn in not embracing it. the way that he really could have to keep the program at a top level. Florida State a year ago looked like they had restored the feeling, as Will Ospreay would say, but then this year happened and just went right in the crapper. You've got a number of teams there, like you said. SMU came in and made some noise. Pittsburgh has been within the confines of the ACC, a very good team in the conference for a number of years. So you have a number of programs there that are noteworthy. But it's very interesting because I think this was a deliberate part of Belichick's strategy if he was going to come back to college. There is no Texas, there's no Georgia, there's no Alabama, there's no Ohio State. There's none of that there. There's nothing that is an obstacle that is going to stop him from, if he translates that $18 million to production on the field the way that Ohio State did this past season with their $20 million, there's nobody at all in the ACC standing in his way if he can convert that.
Oh, I definitely agree, Rick. I mean, the buyout right now, if he left for a job right now, it could be $10 million. After the next season, one season, it goes down to $1 million. They're a little bit behind the 8 ball with the assistant coaches. It seems like he made sure his friends and relatives got jobs with those teams.
Yeah.
Like his son, Mike Lombardi's son, Chris Jones is an interesting hire. He was in the CFL, led a team to a great cup. But the thing is, he still have a lot to do and not much time to do it.
Yeah, and how this all plays out is just going to be fascinating. There are 2 coaching jobs where they put me in mind of me being one of the world's great super fans of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the great Frank Reynolds line, "So you've decided to come crawling back." Rich Rod to West Virginia, and then subsequently also Scott Frost to UCF.
Well, Rick, that Big 12 is wide open. I mean, it's good for both schools. I know Rich Rodriguez burned some bridges when he left for Michigan, that way he handled it. But the thing is, they had a high-power, exciting offense. They'll put lots of points on the board. Scott Frost, he lit it up at UCF and then bombed in Nebraska, where a lot of coaches go to die.
Yeah.
So the thing is that Big 12 is wide open. I don't think necessarily these guys are going to win the Big 12 next season, but they'll be good enough to win maybe eight games and probably and be entertaining in a bowl game.
Yeah, this is one of the things we talked about coming into the season, and I think we had anticipated this when we did our college football preview back in August, was that in the ACC and in what particularly turned out to be the Big 12, all these games as the season went along, where you would expect them to be very competitive, and like Iowa State, how many big games did they play during the season where they were playing fellow contenders in the conference? And they started to slip on a banana peel once it got to November, but all these teams that were playing each other through the course of the season, and again, a lot of games that carried a lot of meaning, and it came down to the last weekend of the season here, and but for a few breaks, I think, but for a unlikely Houston upset in the last week, you might have had Colorado in the championship game, but BYU came very close to it as well. So certainly if either of these 2 guys can elevate their programs, it wouldn't take much to get them in the playoffs, because again, who's really stopping them in the Big 12?
One thing is, Rick, there's going to be no consensus. I don't think there's going to be any consensus next season on who the people think are going to win that Big 12. Arizona State was picked to finish so low, if not less, in the conference, and they shocked the world. So it's one of those situations where it's up for grabs. So many people think maybe BYU next year, maybe Colorado. There's lots of. There's not just going to be one for Iowa State, Kansas State. I mean, the list goes on and on. That Big 12 is a wide open. Anyone can win it and make the college football playoff.
Yeah. So that's what these new coaches are coming into in this situation. So Bronco Mendenhall going to Utah State from New Mexico, and that is something that is going to be very interesting to see how that plays out. His native state of Utah, and somebody who's been pretty successful where he has been previously in his career.
One thing is the Pac-12 is not really much of a step up. I mean, Utah State's a step up of a football program from New Mexico. And the thing is, the Pac-12 still has their own headaches, but they got to find a couple more football teams to join that conference, Rick.
Yeah. So it's going to be a very interesting landscape there. Some other moves that are of some degree of note. you have an interesting move being made by Purdue, bringing in their new coach, Barry Odom from UNLV, where he's had a lot of success. And you look at some of these jobs in the conference here, and it's easy to be kind of dubious because, Jeff Brom going to Purdue a couple of years ago, I was kind of dubious about how high he'd be able to lift them up, and I turned out to be right, not because of any doubt that I had in him, but just in terms of the obstacles that are there. I will say that I said the same thing about Curt Cignetti a year ago at Indiana, and he made me eat my words. Maybe Barry Odom will do the same at Purdue, but it's obviously very tough to crack that top echelon in the Big Ten.
Well, Purdue is a team, ever since Jeff Brom left, they've tailspin. Purdue is a team that if they can, win 6-7 games, get to a bowl game, they're happy. But the fun thing is, look at UNLV's replacement, a guy I like a lot, Dan Mullen. Rick, you may disagree with me, but UNLV might play in the best stadium, college football, high-tech stadium, the Roomba, the Allegiant Stadium. And the thing is, with Boise State going to the Pac-12 next season, UNLV is going to be a contender to win the Mountain West every year and be a contender to make the college football group of 6 as well.
Yeah. So how that plays out there, he really has a chance to make some noise. Point of personal privilege, as they say in Congress, just to rant about something with my alma mater here. Tim Albin, the coach that led our school to the first MAC championship since 1968, the amount of good feeling that he had for that was erased in many quarters, including my own, almost immediately. Doesn't even come back for the celebration on campus, immediately defects to Charlotte, of all places. A real cuck move, if you ask me, jumping at the first job that comes up. The school that's basically like the 5th banana in the Carolinas, if that. So that's just a very perplexing move, and something where seeing a lot of their fans flood the Bobcat Attack message board that I like to lurk on and brag about luring them away. Like, you people are going to be as insignificant as you've been your entire lives. He's not going to be able to help make a dent in that program.
No, AAC is a lot more competitive than that. They're not going to do much. That's just a program where if you get 7 wins and you get to a bowl game, they're happy.
Yeah, exactly. So, very happy with promoting Brian Smith at Ohio, the offensive coordinator. I think that's going to turn out to be a good move. Some other moves here as well. Jake Dickert making the switch and going to Wake Forest. And that's really kind of fascinating the way it plays out with his background from Washington State.
Well, it's a shame that the former coach basically stepped down because he didn't want to deal with this name, image, likeness stuff. We've seen how other coaches, Rick, it doesn't surprise me. But Wake Forest is a team that they play well every year. They play competitive. For being a small program in North Carolina, that's a better job than your Charlotte program.
Yeah, I think so. So I just it really is kind of perplexing, some of these moves and how they've happened here. But as we look at the landscape of these switches, are there any other ones that are really kind of jumping out at you?
Well, the ones that, Temple getting a coach from Sam Houston State. Temple's a program. Come on, until they build their own stadium, Rick, no one's going to care about them.
I agree with that, no doubt. And in looking at this, what's interesting to me, because I said at the top that, and again, if it wasn't for the Belichick thing being such an eyebrow raiser, this would have been probably one of the quieter off seasons that we've had coaching move-wise in quite a while. But that's because a number of coaches have survived that, and I always say this, that like once a coach kind of like looks into the abyss, he's almost been fired but comes back for another year, pro or college. I never like their odds. Ryan Day, as we covered in a previous segment, he manages to survive because it's the fluke of he happens to get a second chance under a new system, win 4 games to go win a national championship. But what you have in many of these other situations, a number of big jobs where you might have thought that perhaps, and it would have taken eating some contract, money here, but we've seen in places like Texas A&M where that's happened. But places as disparate as LSU, Oklahoma, USC, any number of like really big jobs where it looked like the coach basically had 1 foot in the coffin and lives to fight another day for next year. Even Florida State, a year off of what had been a dream season previously, except for the way that it ended, of course, just absolutely going in the crapper this year. That's the kind of season that a lot of coaches don't end up surviving. And I'll tell you this, Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, not that he necessarily did a poor job, but the expectations there are so high. Another year like this year might be enough to where he's gone. As unfair as that may seem to some people, and he really is an excellent coach and recruiter. So there's any number of jobs that didn't come open right now, but may very well be open this time next year.
Yeah, I mean, next year, there'll be some coaches on the hot seat, Rick. Maybe one of them's LSU. Maybe LSU's if Brian Kelly doesn't win, he could be in trouble. Another one which people talk about possibly USC if Lincoln Riley doesn't. I think they're going to be better next season, but there's going to be these coaches are not going to get much of a leeway, Rick, if they don't win. Even with the contract buyouts, these boosters will happily pay it and get rid of them, like what happened in Texas A&M with that huge buyout they gave up.
Well, absolutely, and you're looking now. We're seeing just the beginning of what might be sort of an unthinkable new era in college football. Larry Ellison, with what we saw at Michigan, with him shelling out, I think, the $10 million in NIL money to be able to flip the quarterback prospect to come there. So if you're looking at a thing where we're billionaires like that, and I've sort of like half-jokingly noted that like the Saudi oil princes, right? They like to throw money around in this country. They like to do influence peddling in different places, allegedly. J.D. Vance, who a lot of people think could be the next president of the United States in 2028. What better way to suck up to who you think could be the next president of the United States than putting like $500 million into the Ohio State football program and making J.D. Vance, the alum, very happy? So I'm sort of half joking about that one, but we're on the verge of an era where people with bottomless checkbooks may really be getting involved here, and that'll help with coaching buyouts, that'll help with luring players, that will help in so many different areas to make it, again, imagine if the money involved actually became bigger than the NFL, which it wouldn't take too many of these billionaires to get it to that point.
One thing is you have to know who you are, and a lot of these schools think they can do so much better. And it's funny to see that some of these coaches would rather go to the ACC and not even step foot in the SEC.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's all about, the challenge that's not too big of a challenge, right? Like Bill Belichick, he's going to coach college football, which he's never done before. But again, we saw this year, and you and I have talked about this on air, that right now, the ACC and the Big 12, they're closer to the Mountain West than they are to the SEC and the Big 10. That's the level of separation right now. Just the fact that Boise State ended up getting one of the two byes in the college football playoff, and then you throw the Pac-12 in the mix. They're going to be right in there as well. That's going to weaken the Mountain West, but you're going to have four of those conferences that are far more comparable to each other than any of them are to the Big Two conferences here.
Yeah, that's definitely true, and that's the. I think it's going to be a little bit more exciting when they expand the college football playoff, because what's probably going to happen if they do raise the 14, what they're going to do is they're probably going to guarantee AC getting 2 bids and also the Big 12 getting 2 bids.
Yeah, and this is one of these things that just really kind of makes me wonder too, because I'm going to see with some great degree of interest here what happens with Odom and what happens with Purdue there, because I kind of tend to think that in this day and age, that being in if you're in one of the two power conferences, but you're coming into one of the downtrodden schools in that, are you really better off than if you were at, say, a program like Kansas State, North Carolina State, something like that, where if you really get things going, you can make a strong impact, you can win a conference championship there, versus maybe going 3-9 in a power conference? I've thought about this with different coaches all the way back. I remember like P.J. Fleck was kind of a hot commodity in the 2010s. He almost got the Michigan job the one time. He didn't get it. I think it was the time they went with Harbaugh. And he ends up leaving the MAC to go to Minnesota. And I remember thinking that's kind of a weird thing. And like, he's survived at Minnesota all these years, but you don't hear him being talked about much as a guy who is a candidate to move on to a bigger job. So that's one of these things where the developmental pipeline of coaches in this new era, I'm going to be fascinated to see this, because the downtrodden schools in the power conferences are still able to lure in top-notch candidates, and it's going to be interesting, albeit ones that are, generally speaking, earlier in their career, like a PJ Fleck, but still a really talented young guy. It's going to be interesting to see 5-6 years from now if those type of schools are still going to be able to procure coaches with that skill level, or if they're going to be sick of going to a place that might be deemed a graveyard of coaches.
Well, PJ Fleck, I think he's doing a phenomenal job in Minnesota. He's winning an average of 8 games a week, 8-game season. They won 8 straight bowl games. It's been the thing is, and they that type of team. Every year there'll be a team that's not supposed to beat. So and he's making good money. He's comfortable, and the team and then the college kids love him.
Yeah, that's true. And so seeing what the path is with these coaches, the pipeline from job to job, and what is deemed to be a big raise from one job to another. Some of that may change over a period of time as maybe some of the traditional power schools develop NIL programs that make them powers, much like North Carolina. You get the right coach in there, the money follows, and we'll see. They're going to be looking for an immediate return on investment next season, and I think there's every reason to believe that they might get it. Again, Belichick's coaching in the NFL the last couple of years, and quite frankly, more so on the player procurement side, was a little bit more questionable. That for Bill having the ironclad grip over the front office, they really weren't drafting well, nor doing that great in free agency, having to overpay guys for a long period of time. So we'll see if North Carolina truly represents a fresh start for him in that regard. But any other stories about the old coaching carousel we've seen this offseason, Fran?
It was kind of interesting that Jeff Monken didn't get any consideration. He's done a phenomenal job at Army, but then again, it would have to be the absolute right fit for him to go to another school. Yeah,
it would, and we'll have to see how his career arc ends up playing out here. But always really look forward to breaking this stuff down with you, Fran, and thank you so much for being here today to talk about the coaching changes in the 2024-25 offseason. And thank you, everybody, for checking out FDH Lounge Mini Episode 1805.